freedomslips.com. It's home to fresh, relatively uncensored ideas and conversations in the chat room, and a place to get your merch. The station is not beholden to anyone, but does require your support. Please donate or subscribe or buy some of that awesome merch on offer. This is show number 2. Show number 2. Catch the Cave on air, online, and on your smart device. So grab an app to listen anywhere or listen at home. Raise Tabletop Digital Radio. Why not join the club? And subscribe to the archives. It only costs $5. Well, it does. Might be free. It could be free. $5 a month to access the Freedom Slips archives and check out all the hosts' shows. There's some awesome shows. After this is actually Mitchell Bubb, so hopefully you can stay for that. At this point, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. That's the Dark people, me here in Pemulwuy, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and future for the privilege to broadcast from the lands they took care of for countless generations. Last week, I spoke to you about the purpose of the show: Plato's Cave, Black Iron Prison, the Matrix, the Panopticon, the great prison, the great unknown prison. Everyone who had ever lived was literally surrounded by the iron walls of the prison. They were all inside it, and none of them knew it. Again, that's the quote from Philip K. Dick's Oralis. But what does it take to keep people in prison? I'll give you a couple of examples. This is really, really important. And today I want to talk about fear. Fear, in all of its wonderful forms, been with us, well, since the beginning. It's one of the most primal things we feel, more now than ever before, in my opinion. I watched this Western once, and I think it was, I want to say John Wayne and Dean Martin. I think they were both in. Dean Martin, I think, was playing the drunk deputy. And I think it was, but I could be wrong. It could be a different duo. But essentially, there was a prison in the town. The sheriff had that prison, but there were no bars. There was simply an open room with, a cell, but the cell was not separated by any iron bars. They had not been delivered yet, it appeared. So what the sheriff did, he took a bucket of paint and painted a long white line separating the cell from the rest of the sheriff's office. Just a white line painted on the floor. Then he went out and took a bucket of red paint and liberally drizzled the red paint all over the white line. And soon, a prisoner was brought in. The sheriff said, "Well, there's your prison. Cell over there. You're not allowed to step across the white line." And the prisoner said, "Well, are you slow? Of course I am. There's no wall here. There's no bars. I'll just walk out of here when you're not around." Okay. Look, there'll always be someone in this room, and little Joe over there. He's got a scatter gun. And you see the red marks on the floor there? The prisoner looked down. "Yeah, I see it, all right." Well, that's the last guy that tried to cross the white line. Taken aback, the prisoner, who was somewhat dim-witted, took a couple of steps back and sat down on his bed. Suffice it to say, the white line was sufficient to keep him in prison. So why am I telling you this? Because no matter how hard we try, no matter how wonderful and complex and sophisticated we think we are, we've all been conditioned. Just like this prisoner was conditioned not to step across the line, and the immediate negative feedback would have been to be shot and scattering his blood on the white line, just like the first guy. Little did he know, of course, there was no first guy and no one was shot, but this was all paint. We are completely and utterly conditioned from birth. In fact, as I said last week, our very biology conditions us to be and think a certain way. It's just the nature of the beast in its most true sense. And fear conditioning is the most powerful. Okay? Fear is is the most primal, one of the most primal emotions we can feel. Your brain actually shuts down completely. The higher brain functions cease to function if you're truly terrified. Right? There are some biological effects on your body. Your bladder and bowel will empty. You might even throw up in readiness for what has been termed your flight or fight response. So your body is getting ready to either fight or run away. And that's triggered by fear. Fear. It releases an enormous amount of adrenaline, increases your heart rate, perspiration, your senses are heightened, you're hyper aware. But like I said, the higher brain functions are shutting down. Let me sidestep for a second. I'll come back to the fear conditioning. Did you ever ask yourself why you stop at the green light? Sorry, stop at a red light at the traffic light? Or you go when there's a green light? There's no one there telling you to do it. Why do you stop at a stop sign? Even if there's no car around. Right? Or why do you stop at a red traffic light when there's no car around? Either. Why do you do that? Well, the answer is because we were conditioned to do it. Since we were little children, we were conditioned to do it. It would feel wrong if we didn't do it. Funnily enough, I've spent a little bit of time in India. And India is not unique in this, but India is a perfect example of this kind of conditioning gone wrong or not applied at all. So in India, traffic lights, stop signs, even markings on the road are suggestions at best. Okay, a 4-lane highway in India, anywhere in India, is really a 10-lane highway, or as many vehicles as you can get next to each other. Okay, that's what kind of traffic there is. If there's a red light, people might slow down, right? And the traffic consists of tuk-tuks, bicycles, motorbikes, contraptions you've never seen before. Some of them look like home-built tricycles and cars, all manners of lorries, cars, and other transportation. And they're all trying to edge closer to, either the turning lane or just going straight. So everybody's trying to get somewhere, but not really making room for the other guy. So there's this constant beeping of horns, and I guess fender benders, they don't even count. If you drive in a new car, that's your own fault. But my point is, in India, they don't stop for a red light, and they don't stop for a stop sign either. Again, maybe slow down, and if there's oncoming traffic, sure enough. Why is that? Why? Because the conditioning hasn't held there. Okay, the conditioning didn't hold there as well as it did elsewhere. In Europe, specifically in Europe, and by extension, North America, large parts of South America, certainly Australia and some parts of Asia, we've been extremely well conditioned to follow agreed upon abstract symbols, like a stop sign, like a traffic light. In the olden days, there had to be a cop. And in India, still there has to be a cop. If you really want the traffic to flow, you have to put a cop in the middle of the intersection. Otherwise, it won't work. Yeah. It's a really interesting, different mindset that exists there between peoples. And again, in the West, we've been super conditioned to simply obey symbols of power and abstract symbols of traffic regulations. Is it a bad idea? No, this is a good idea. I mean, you should stop at a stop sign, otherwise you might cause an accident. But the point is, a lot of people wouldn't and don't. Okay? It's our conditioning. Our conditioning goes deep. It's just a little highlight there. So let's talk about fear conditioning as well. So fear conditioning, like I said, sets in at a very young age, and it is reinforced all the time. We are taught to fear authority. We are taught to fear our parents. Well, in the olden days, now everybody's a winner, everybody gets a trophy, and nobody ever gets disciplined. So that fear has dropped away a little, leaving us a little bit rudderless, and the fear has then been replaced by the fear that we experience in social media, infotainment, general entertainment, and the world we interact with. So all the messaging we get, not necessarily from our parents or close family, but certainly from the rest of society, is all fear-driven. But we are, nonetheless, we are, or were, when I was a child, always taught to respect authority and mind your place, and be fearful to a certain extent of those that have power over you. So you obey them. Yeah? And to some extent, we're also all victims of Stockholm syndrome, where we, identify with those that oppress us and feel, bad for them and want to, make them feel better and all these wonderful things. It's really quite interesting how it all develops. Now, by and large, human society has always been kept in fear. The vast majority of humans. Or ignorance. We're going to talk about ignorance at another point. Fear and ignorance are the most powerful tools that the parasites have to keep us in line. It is that simple. It really is. And you don't need very many parasites, or you don't need very many members of the parasitic class to actually enforce that, right? Because there's one thing we love to do, which is, we like to collaborate. Human beings are collaborators at heart. If there's a percentage in it for you, you will sell down you will sell down your family and friends down the river. You will sell them right down to the bone grinding factory if it comes down to that. And we saw that in recent history. We've seen it in World War II, World War I, in ancient history as well. We are a species of collaborators. We're a species of traitors. We're a species of people that are really trying to get an advantage for ourselves and our families. That's how we function. We don't function on a species level. We don't even really function on a national level. We're functioning more or less on a tribal level, but even that gives way to the family or even the single unit level. Okay? It's very difficult for us to work coherently in large groups. It's just not human nature. I wish it was, but it isn't. So we are fear conditioned. And as I said, fear conditioning is very deep. And like I also said, it shuts down the higher brain functions. Okay, you are completely paralyzed when it comes to your rational thinking. You're acting completely instinctual. You can no longer form complex tactical or strategic thoughts if you're truly terrified. It really is just a matter of getting ready to fight or getting ready to run away and putting your body in the optimized state to do so. And recently, over the last maybe 30 years, I want to say, about 30 years, that's when it really got going. The media that is coming at us, and now it's the social media as well, has been driving that fear deeper and deeper into us. We fear everything. We fear foreigners. We fear the dark. We fear sketchy neighborhoods in town. We fear the pedophile around the corner. We fear for our children. We fear politicians. We fear the police. We fear criminals, of course. We fear, other nations. We fear terrorism. It's interesting to declare war on a well, you can't really call it an ideology. I guess a meme. I guess terrorism, or the war on terror is the war on an abstract concept. It's like declaring war on the color green. It doesn't really help anyone define its boundaries, which was really the point. So and funnily enough, specifically in fairly recent history, the United States, and the most powerful nation still on the planet, and has been for the last, well, let's call it 70 years, always needed someone to define itself against. There was the Soviet threat, the Red Menace. There was Arab or Muslim terrorism, Islamism. There was homegrown terrorism, right wing and left wing, all good. And now there's a new threat emerging, China. But America always needed an enemy, right? When Russia bowed out in the early 90s, a new enemy had to be found, right? Which Muslim terrorists obliged. So that worked out pretty well. You had the first Gulf War in the early 90s, if you remember that. And that dragged on. And then we had the terrible events of 9/11. And that led to a 20-year war on terror. There was also the war on drugs. Again, drugs as an enemy is a little odd. Terror as an enemy is a little odd, especially when the terror is usually visited upon the people by its government. by terrorizing them with news, right? It's really interesting to look at the development of fear and how it's been used to force us into a certain way of thinking. So like I said before, our biology forces us to be and think a certain way. On top of that, we've got social conditioning, we've got language conditioning, and then as the final nail in the coffin right now, because it's accelerating, we've got the fear conditioning. The fear conditioning in many ways is the most effective because it doesn't allow for any rational argument. Like I said, when you're afraid, your higher brain functions shut down. And the messages that come to you have to be very simple, right? Axis of evil, evildoers, wrongdoers, things like that. Your brain can't process anything else. And let's not talk about the state of education that exists, even globally, not just in the Western nations. It's very much in decline. So you have this fear conditioning, and you are ready to receive information in that state of fear. So the information that you want is anything that will take that fear away. So David Icke, I think, might have coined the phrase, but he may not, but I certainly heard it from him. Problem, reaction, solution. So, you create a problem that people are afraid. Oh my God, this is terrible. This is going to happen. And, the Germans blamed the Jews. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that. The Nazi Party, Adolf Hitler and Goebbels, blamed the Jews for the loss that Germany sustained World War I. It's called the Dolchstoßlegende. It's the knife in the back, where they said the rich bankers and industrialists, they had sold out Germany and betrayed the troops in the trenches. That was the common narrative. But it still took the Nazi Party years and years to dehumanize the Jewish population to a point where they could do what they wanted to do, right? Because the fear was that you have to fear the Jew. The Jew is responsible for the tainting of the blood, for ruining our culture, ruining the German people, etc., etc. Whatever, any evil under the sun you can think of, the Jews were blamed for it. Now, interestingly enough, that conditioning didn't take hold very well. I'll tell you why. In 1938, there was an event called the Reichskristallnacht, which was essentially the night when a lot of Nazi activists went around German cities smashing shop windows that belonged to Jewish shop owners. And Reichskristall referring to the glass that was smashed, crystal. That was the Empire's Crystal Night, loosely translated. Doesn't really capture the ethos of the word. But what happened was this. They would take Nazis from Bonn, let's say, in a German city, and drive them to Cologne, another German city. And they would take the Nazis from Cologne and drive them to Bonn, because the demonization hadn't gone far enough that Germans would dissociate the the relationship they had with the Jews they knew all their lives, and the shopkeeper that where I buy my milk or whatever it might be, maybe the tailor I go to all my life. So they had to take the Nazis from one city to another because they didn't know those Jews, so they could smash their windows. That wouldn't happen today. Today, we've advanced so far that Goebbels would be jumping up and down with joy if he saw how far we've come in our propaganda machine and in the way we present news, information, and data, and ultimately fear to the audience. And we do it in such brilliant ways, because everything is meant to make you afraid. We have managed to lower the threshold of people's attention. Okay? People find it hard to concentrate on things, so they need easily consumed information. They need easy answers. They need easy data bits to hang on to. Like I said earlier, simple messages, evildoers, etc., etc. It's really, really important to do it simply, and to do it fast and simple and often. Fast, simple, often. Fast, simple, often. You do that for long enough, your message will come through. And all of us that are part of this media culture, we live in this constant state of fear. We can't really put our finger on it. It's like, why am I afraid? Why am I so mistrusting of people? I mean, what is it? I don't trust the government. I don't trust my neighbor. I certainly don't trust my employer. I don't know. Can I trust my family? Or maybe I can. It's this constant hammering of fear into us. There's of course a purpose to it, because once you've got people reduced to that state of fear, they will look for strong leadership. Give me strong leadership, right? You throw in a few crises, like the financial crisis that was there. Now we got the pandemic. That's a great crisis. People are very afraid. That's awesome. That's brilliant. Okay, even if there was no virus, right? The social engineering that's happening is fantastic. Right? We're pitting people against each other. Oh, you're vaccinated. Are you vaccinated? Are you vaccinated? Oh, yeah, I'm not vaccinated. Why are you not vaccinated? You should be vaccinated. Vaccinate this, vaccinate that. Oh, have you had a test? You should get a test. You better get a test. Oh, you want to work here? Ooh, can't work here. Oh, because if you work here and you're sick, you make me sick. But you're vaccinated. Yeah, but so you can't argue. You can't you can't bring logic into the equation. You really can't. But my point is that for decades now, we've been fed fear on a constant basis. In the media, that's the West, right? And then other parts of the world, and the people that aren't part of this media deluge of fear, they are actually living in fear of real things, like wars or famines or disease, right? So large parts of Africa, parts of Asia, parts of South America certainly as well, and these days, I guess Eastern Europe to some extent. They're actually living in fear because there is unrest and there is war, and that fear is real, right? So we don't have to make these people afraid. They're already afraid. Plus, they don't have any power. We don't care. What we worry about as the parasites are the people that have an education or should have had an education, the middle classes, if you will, the many that are smart enough to think for themselves, or were in the past at least. And we've done our best in the parasitic class to undermine them. And it is those people we're trying to feed that fear to on a daily basis, even though there shouldn't be any fear. There should be, no, there's nothing to be afraid of. You know what I mean? There really isn't anything to be afraid of. There aren't any more or less pedophiles today than there were 50 years ago, 100 years ago. There aren't any more serial killers. Okay? What we are seeing, though, we're seeing violence a lot more, seemingly a lot more. But you have to look at it in context, too. There are 300 million people in the United States. 300 million people. How many shootings are there annually? And how many people get killed in those shootings? Yes, it's a bad thing. It shouldn't happen. Of course not. And why this happens is a whole other thing. And I think a lot of these things are staged as well. And no, they're not acted out. I think these attacks actually happen, but they are sanctioned by the parasites to again make us fearful. 50, 60 years ago, children would bring their guns to school. Why? Because they would go hunting after school. I know this happened in America. I know this happened in Australia. Other parts of the world as well. There was no gun violence in schools. What has changed? Many things have changed. But my point is that it's not the gun that's the issue here, right? It's how we teach our children about guns. It's how guns are perceived, how everybody has access to a gun without any education in gun safety or gun ownership or gun usage at all. None, zero. My grandfather, I was lucky. My grandfather was a forester, and he taught me how to shoot when I was like 5 or 6. And I cleaned my gun with him when I was 5. He had a Smith & Wesson 38. He had 2 other revolvers. He had a carbine rifle and he had a single barrel shotgun. All in his cabinet in his living room. Not a gun safe in Germany. And ammunition all together in that cabinet. A wooden cabinet at that. And I learned to shoot in his corridor. The corridor was, I want to say, about 5 meters long. And to the right was the kitchen. The next door was the on the right was the bathroom. On the left, it went to the bedrooms. Then at the end of the corridor was the living room, and the living room, the door you could open and then extend it another couple of meters. And he put two telephone books at the top of this cabinet. It was just a living room cabinet. That's where his guns were. And he said, "Okay, take the gun." He said to me, and so I took it, and just aim. You aim the sides, the front and the back side, and when they're level, you shoot. You squeeze the trigger, you don't pull it. Okay, so I did. That was a small caliber pistol, not a Smith & Wesson 38, I must say. And I was about 5. And I hit the telephone book, and he was very impressed. He was very, very impressed. He had lost his right arm in the Battle of Breslau on the Eastern Front at the age of 40. He had been sent to the front at a very late date, of course, as you can imagine. At 40, not very many people went. And he went because one of his neighbors had denounced him. He was a forester, and he had British POWs working for him in the forest. And the neighbor, it seems, felt that he treated them too well. Okay, so and he didn't want to join the party. That was a big thing. He didn't join the party. He said, "Nah, I'm not going to join the party." But a lot of people, he had a lot of influential friends, right? He had a lot of powerful friends. I guess that's what saved him from the camps. It was sent to the front rather than the camp. But it was a death sentence. Being sent to the Eastern Front at that time, this was 1944, was pretty much a death sentence. He survived, obviously, but just he lost his right arm in the process, fighting there. But my point is, he was denounced by a neighbor, right? So this neighbor really had nothing to gain from it, except that maybe he was jealous of my grandfather. I don't know. And another time, the Gestapo came to my grandmother's house as well, and it's terrifying, right? So fear is a real thing, and people joke about it, but it's hard to imagine what that actually means when these leather jacketed, leather booted people come to your house, and you don't know if you're going to be taken away or not. I remember, and this is all fear related. I was in high school in Germany, and part of the curriculum was to go to the east, because back then it was West Germany, East Germany. I'm from the west. And we would have excursions into the east, so like a camp away, if you will, for a week or so. And we were all, I think, 13 or 14 years old, co-ed, so boys and girls on the bus, and we're all joking around. Oh yeah, I'm not going to be afraid of the East Germans. Ha ha ha! I'll tell them, where to go. Those communists. So big talk is my point. Big talk all the way to the border, all the way. Then we get to the border. The bus was completely silent. 2 soldiers step into the bus with submachine guns. They look, for all intents and purposes, like World War II soldiers. I mean, that's what I guess the East German Army's uniform looked like. And everybody is completely and utterly quiet. Nobody would say a thing because there was fear. There was real fear. Because most of us had never, seen a submachine gun or been confronted with potentially hostile soldiers. I mean, actually, I think I was the only one in my class that ever had any gun training. I think my grandfather. Yeah. Anyway, so it was a sobering moment for all of us. There's no jokes, not a single joke. So, but my point here is that fear is a very real, very tangible thing. And of course, if people are clamoring for something, to get back to my point, because they're afraid of something. So we put something in front of them, the parasites. Here you go, parasites. They create a situation which creates fear, real or imaginary. And the people will then go, "Oh, this is bad. Guns are bad. Or Muslim terrorists are bad. Or communists are bad. Or whatever it is. Whatever it might be. Whatever your particular scapegoat or token of fears. And the parasites come along, the problem, little people, we're here to help you. We'll do this, we'll give you gun laws, and we will take care of those communists. And we were going to bomb all those evil terrorists into the Stone Age. Yay! Yay! We love the leader. Yay! Shout all of us. Because We feel better now. Our fear has been taken away. Oh, I love the leader. He looks after me so well. And this has now been iterated so many times for the past few decades that we don't know the difference anymore. We don't, right? And even if the information is conflicting, we still will fall in line because we're afraid, right? The only thing that I see that is different now, because the parasites are pushing so hard, a lot more people are standing up, right? And that's really the only way that we can avoid what's coming next. But it's a really tough decision to make for yourself, right? What you want to do and how you want to do it. What kind of disobedience? Civil disobedience, right? What are you doing? Do you want to go protest? Sure. What's the point? Will it change anything? Is always my question. If you go protesting, will it change anything? See, people can be pushed for a very long time. Very long time. They can be kept in fear and abysmal conditions for a very, very long time. Again, I want to amuse you with a little anecdote from my family. My grandmother's brother, so my granduncle, he fought in the 6th Army in Stalingrad. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it was a complete disaster. The entire campaign was just doomed from the beginning. You can't win a land war in Russia, and you should never invade in winter. It's just, you shouldn't be there in winter. You know, if you invade in spring, get out by summer. Don't be there in autumn. And if you're caught there in winter, you're done. Napoleon learned this, Hitler learned this. But anyway, so here we are, Stalingrad, 100,000 men. They are completely decimated. The survivors are taken to gulags, prison camps in Siberia. My grandmother's brother spent, always get the number wrong, it was either 13 or 16 years in Siberia. 13 or 16 years. And now I want to tell you about the exact opposite of fear. Now, of course, you're afraid. I mean, imagine living in Siberia, if it was, I think it was 16 years. For 16 years, snow is so high you can't see the sky, right? Hardly enough food, forced labor. He never spoke about it much. He just didn't speak about it, right? But he was on medication when he came back for the rest of his life. Hefty pension from the West German government, but what's it going to do for you if your body is shot? So there he is, 16 years. 16 years, no end in sight. After 16 years, he was released. So one thing, though, that there were men in that camp. They were fine one day, right? Fine, but they were dead the next. And what he said is something happened that took away their hope. Something happened that completely robbed them of any hope of ever getting out of there, and they simply curled up and died. There was nothing with them, nothing wrong with them, no more or less than the other men. Physically, there was nothing wrong with them physically per se, right? I mean, yeah, undernourished, etc., sure enough, but they just died because hope had left them. And that's a really important thing to understand as well, right? Because hope is the exact opposite of fear. We all live in constant fear. What we should be living is in constant hope for a better world, a better outcome, a better this, a better that. Hope that people are better than we think they are. Okay? We have to fight the fear. It's I know it sounds like a hippie song, fight the fear. But ultimately, if we give in to our fears, if we let the fear conditioning take hold, and it has taken a big hold on a lot of people, I tell you that, then they win. It's because that's all you need. Because we've been conditioned to respond to these stimuli. You know, when this a problem comes up, oh no, something bad is happening. Please, leader, make it go away. Make it go away. And the leader will step in and go, oh, of course I will. Let me take care of that for you. And that's what's been happening all along. And it will keep on happening. And on and on and on until we say no. Please stop. And that's why I was happening, you know, that's why I was hoping rather that the Ascension event would take place. It did not, for reasons I outlined last week. We can only hope that maybe there's one of those events in the near future, hopefully. In the meantime, though, we really have to fight the fear conditioning. Be more critical when you watch the news. Don't take it for granted that somebody is painted in a certain light and is therefore automatically guilty. And don't be afraid of these tropes, stereotypes. Please. The world has never been an idyllic place. But our perception of it now is horrendous. A lot of people are truly terrified. Right? Now China is emerging as a new threat. Is it real? Well, look, as real as the Russian threat was. Right? Is anybody insane enough to press the button? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Is any one person insane enough to initiate Armageddon? I personally don't think so. Okay, my personal opinion is it could happen, but if it did happen, it would be a series of unfortunate circumstances. It wouldn't be a deliberate attempt, because no matter how good your first strike capabilities are these days, or whatever else you do, you cannot survive what comes after. It's not possible. Even if only one side is obliterated, the nuclear winter will destroy the rest that's coming after. Okay, radiation clouds will move around, and even if there are different weapons that are being used, unless it's a conventional war that is going to be fought, right? It's not going to happen. Nobody would risk a nuclear war, because that will be the end. Full stop. So, yet still we live in fear of it, but I want you to look at fear from a different perspective. I've mentioned this many times on The Shiny Side Out. Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther, the church reformer, some 500 years ago, that guy. In fact, the guy that Martin Luther King was named after. Anyway, he was asked once, and I don't know if he really was asked, but that's the story, and that's the lore that we have. He was asked once, what would you do? What would you do if you knew the world is going to end tomorrow? Martin Luther thought about it for a while, and then he said, I would plant an apple tree. Now, let's break this down for a second, because it's important that we do. He wasn't going to succumb to fear. He wasn't going to break down and curse the earth and the heavens and cry and rend his hair and tear his clothes. None of that. No, he's going to plant an apple tree. Why was he going to plant an apple tree? The world is going to be destroyed tomorrow. Now, he didn't say any more than what I just told you, but what I'm saying to you now is this. He still had today. He still had every moment until that destruction, inevitable or not. But until the extraction is a reality, it's only hypothetical. It's only a potential. And that's where quantum physics comes into a little bit as well. But we'll get to that in due course, not today. So because all we have, really, all we truly have is each moment that we live, moment by moment by moment. Okay, and I'm the first to put up my hand and to admit I don't make the most of my moments. I give in to anger and fear, and rage and disappointment, and all the negative emotions. I do, and I do try to be a better person, and we all do. But ultimately, this is really all we have. Just this moment right now. Nothing else is certain. Okay, we've lived through all the other moments that we've experienced, seemingly in a linear fashion, and we don't know about the moments that are yet ahead of us. Right? I mean, any of us could suffer a heart attack at any given time, a stroke, or slip and drown in a puddle, for all we know. But we have the moment, and we have hope for the next moment, and the moment after that, and many more moments to follow, hopefully. And that's really what Martin Luther, I think, is trying to tell us. You have the moment, make the most of the moment. And I would like to plant an apple tree. I want to create life. I want to start life. I want to give this apple seed a chance at life, no matter how futile the action, no matter how misguided even by others' standards. Okay? And this is the only way to break through that fear conditioning, taking each moment. Whenever you see like this next fear item on the news or on your social media or whatever it might be, ask yourself this: well, hang on a second. How is this affecting me right now? And if I feel strongly enough about it, what can I do about it? What can I do about it, rather than give in to this mindless fear or reaction to, because it's like a Pavlovian reaction now, right? So something is put in front of us, and like the dogs, we start, barking or salivating, I should say. That's what happened. As soon as the bell rang, they started salivating because they would get fed. So we're the same way. A piece of fear is put in front of us, and we have our fear reaction, whatever it might be, for you. Oh, that's my reaction of, you might start worrying, become neurotic, or you need to go and exercise and, de-stress, or maybe you start shouting, or I don't know, like whatever it might be, whatever your fear reaction is, try to stop yourself. Go, hang on, whoa, how is this affecting me right now in this moment? And what can I do to change it? What can I do to create a different outcome here? What can I do to not have the fear win? Because they will win. The parasites will win if we give into our fear. Like I said before, ignorance and fear were the key tools they've been using. Now, ignorance is coming back a big way, big time. But for hundreds of years, they kept the vast majority of us in ignorance. Many of us were illiterate, couldn't read or write, and had to rely on the few educated people to tell us what was what. If we went to church or the temple or the synagogue or whatever it might have been, right? Chances are that you had no idea what was being said. Well, not true in the synagogue case, but certainly true in the case of the Christian churches. Because back then most of the sermons were held in Latin, and none of the folk, unless they happened to live in Italy, understood Latin. Right? But even the modern Italian is quite different from Latin. So people, for the most part, had no idea what was going on. They went to church, and they were completely ignorant to any of it, to anything that was said. In fact, they had no education at all. There was no education for anyone except the rich, right? And the church in Europe held the reins to that education. In the East, it was a little bit different, but again, the vast majority, the peasant class, didn't have an education. They just had enough to live and get by, counting, maybe some basic reading potentially, but not a lot. So ignorance was massively important to the parasites back then. Then things changed, and civilizations evolved, and even the parasites can't stop that. And people became more educated, but soon enough, and certainly right now, there were efforts undertaken to influence our education systems and what we're taught and how we're taught. Critical thinking was discouraged, and it still is in many institutions, in many countries in the world. But we'll talk about ignorance, education, and all of that in another show. So the truth is, we cannot give in to fear. That is a truth. But we must live continuously in hope, the opposite of fear. Fear and hope. And it's really not that hard of a switch to make, right? I mean, the next time a negative piece of news comes up, hope everything is going to turn out all right. Or, well, it doesn't really affect me right now. I shouldn't worry about it. Right? Yeah, some interesting, I guess, psychological theories around spheres of influence and things we control, things we cannot control. And it does help to think of it in terms like that. Think of yourself inside a circle. Inside that circle are all the things that you can control, all the things you have every right to worry about. Right? But then you've got circles outside that circle with things that you can't control, like climate, like what Xi Jinping has for dinner, or if that will cause him to start World War III. And then the circles get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're further and further removed from having any influence over it. So look at your own little circle around you and see what you can influence. You can certainly control yourself, right? You can control your own reactions. That's one. You can, be the person that you want to be, and show others by example as to what that could look like. You can probably, maybe not control, but influence people around you, your family, your friends. I mean, they wouldn't be your family and friends if you didn't have any communication with them. Certainly, your friends, they must like you. You can have conversations with them. Work things out together. Your neighbors, your community, maybe your larger community, maybe you live in a village or in an apartment building or whatever it might be. But there are people around you that you can talk to, right? And you can cultivate this thinking of hope and not fear. Because hope doesn't shut down any brain functions, it enhances them. Okay? If you are hopeful, your brain is fully functioning, all the higher brain functions, all the good stuff that lets you make good decisions. Fear, exact opposite. Higher brain functions shut down. And that's what they want. They don't want you thinking about stuff. Because when you start thinking about stuff, you might ask questions. And Lord, God forbid, those questions are good questions that don't have any good answers. Okay? That's the last thing they want. So it's important to cultivate that hope. But fear is very effective. And we see it everywhere. And it's really hard to get out of. And fear usually goes hand in hand with another thing I loathe. And that's the mob. So I don't like people at all. But I like persons. And a friend of mine recently pointed that out to me on Facebook, and he's absolutely correct. It's a shout out to Jeff if you're listening. And he's right. People are no good. A person is. Because as soon as you put a person to a group, into a mob, the person starts to lose their individuality. Not everybody, but a lot of us. A lot of us are then prone to plug into something called groupthink, mob mentality, where our personal responsibility is diminished because, well, the mob is doing it. If the mob is doing it, then I can do it. Let's go and burn down the library. Let's go burn down the observatory. I mean, The Simpsons make a spectacular show of it. There's this meteor coming to hit Springfield. It actually burns up in the end and nothing happens, like tiny little pebble, and then I think Marge picks it up. Anyway, the point is, the mob then goes and runs to the observatory, which first warned them of the meteorite, burns it down. Let's burn down the observatory so this shall never happen again. But it's that kind of mob thinking, that I abhor. Because on the face of it, oh yeah, let's burn it down, because everything started when the observatory told us about it. So clearly the solution is to burn down the observatory. Yes, good thinking. And it truly is that way. In a mob, people lose themselves completely. This was described very aptly by both perpetrators and survivors of the Rwandan massacre. In the space of 6 weeks, about 500,000 people were hacked to death with machetes, and farm implements, etc. Not very many guns were used at all. And people that did this, they said they were like swept up in this emotional wave of, I don't know, killing, cleansing, maybe, as they thought of it as well. And almost impossible for them to stop it, to extract themselves from the mob once it started. The bloodlust, the carnage, the horror of it all, right? And yeah, survivors saw. I mean, they said these people had crazed looks. Right? They were like maniacs, like berserkers, like only intent on killing, not able to stop themselves. Rwanda is not unique, which is really interesting, right? Because it's happened in Cambodia in the killing fields. It's happened in World War II. It happened in all the major battles. It's just who we are. right? Or it's a part of our biology and psychology that we get caught up in that. It's up to us not to. It's up to us to condition ourselves so we don't get caught up in it, to avoid mobs and mob thinking. Sure, there's strength in numbers, and that's a good thing too. And in fact, we have the numbers over the parasites, and still here we are. They've got it over us. They're ruling us and have been ruling us for a long, long time, right? Because they know which buttons to push. They know when to shut up and when to rile us into action. It doesn't always go their way, right? But it goes their way most of the time. Because for the most part, we act like a headless mob when we're faced with crises. We can't help ourselves, right? And we are more and more conditioned into that fear, more and more. Last week I said, not last week, Tuesday, it's Tuesday, right? It's only a couple of days ago. I was talking about how I played outside for a long time when I was a child. When I say, I mean, late into the evening, without my parents knowing where I was. Obviously, I was with my friends, but even if I hadn't been, they wouldn't know. They weren't worried. Or if they were worried, it didn't stop them, or they didn't stop me from doing it. So different times, yeah, but not really. I mean, the world hasn't really changed that much, I don't think. But now today, helicopter parenting is I guess a normal thing now, right? Where we have our kids within earshot, certainly within sight. I know many years ago, a colleague of mine and I thought about this was before it actually became a thing. Having tags for children, like little GPS trackers. Then we thought, no one's going to go for that. It's too invasive. Little did we know, we should have really gone for it. Vito, if you're listening, we should have done it, man. We should have really gone for it. Because that was a great idea. It was Vito's idea, and yeah. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. My point is that we've become more fearful, and we have been made more fearful, and we are driven into more and more fear every day. And like I said, this latest thing, I'm just curious to see what's coming next. I've got some ideas, but this pandemic that we're in right now, that's a masterstroke. That is genius. Not only do you get people to live in fear, no, you get to divide people as well. You get to threaten people. You get to impose rules on people which don't really make much sense if you really think about it logically, right? There's a lot going on right now globally, right? I mean, 9/11 did a lot. 9/11, that was a real game changer. It really was massive. That to the long war, they called it in the end. The war on terror morphed into the long war. That reminded me so much of 1984. It was not funny, but there we are, right? It is essentially what we have come to accept as reality. We are okay with this continued curbing of our rights, of our ability to do things. And we're also okay that now we're punished for certain things as well. So all of these things like vaccine passports, travel only for the people that can show they're not sick or they have had the vaccination internationally, even within the country. And now people are getting fired, or potentially getting fired if they're not vaccinated. That's very interesting, right? But it creates fear. It creates fear both in the people that might lose their job because you're fearful. You don't want to lose your job. I mean, you have no money, right? That's a fear situation. But you're also creating fear in the other people that are getting vaccinated and saying, oh, these people should get vaccinated. If they're not vaccinated, they're going to make me sick, right? So it's creating fear all around. That's really the game here. It's not whether or not you're vaccinated or not. Parasites couldn't care less. They want to create as much fear as possible. Fear, and divide people. All right. The more that they can divide the people, the better, because there's no unified resistance. There's no solid argument against them. No one will stand up, because if we're divided amongst ourselves, then they can do whatever they want, and they do. Fear. The key is fear. You think that what happens on Wall Street is not planned? There's no such thing as a coincidence. I think it was. I don't want to miss. Oh, there's the music already. All right, look. I hope you enjoyed this. Mitchell Buff is coming up next. This is Revolution Radio, and your support is much appreciated. This is Listener Funded Radio. Peace out, and I hope to catch you all on Sunday for Shiny Side Up.